They didn't expect the guard to question it. Not the receipts, not the fuel logs, and definitely not what was tucked behind the dashboard of Camilla's car. But he did. And what he found was enough to impound the entire vehicle, right there, inside Windsor, with the king watching. Now, before we show you the moment that evidence came out, and the order that left no room for argument, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from, tap subscribe with the bell icon turned on, and stay right here. Because this wasn't just a car being impounded, it was the moment a royal guard followed the truth and found something Camilla never meant anyone to see. The rain hadn't started yet, but the wind carried its warning. Sergeant Corin Ashwell stood beneath the arched roof of Windsor's Fleet Annex, with his clipboard pressed flat against his chest. Mid-morning, quarterly audit rotation. This wasn't ceremony, this was accounting. Every royal vehicle queued for Treasury verification, fuel logs, maintenance receipts, fleet card reconciliation. Most passed without issue. A missing tag here, a misdated service entry there. Nothing that required more than a note, until one entry stood out. Crown Standard 704. A sleek black Bentley, refueled 6 times in 3 months, detailed twice. Tyre rotation, interior polish, all billed to the same account. Queen's Memorial Trust. Ashwell's pen hovered. That fund should have been frozen. Locked down the week after Her Majesty's funeral. No new charges, no active transactions. That was the whole point. Preservation, not operations. He flipped back 2 pages in the audit binder. Checked the ledger code again. QMTOP 1107. Still active. He turned toward the bay. The Bentley sat beneath the service arch, engine ticking softly as it cooled. Black paint gleaming despite the grey morning light. And standing beside it, phone in one hand, sunglasses perched despite the overcast sky, Thomas Parker Bowles. Ashwell approached with measured steps, boots quiet on concrete. "Sir?" Thomas glanced up. "Barely." "Yes?" "Treasury audit. Need to verify the fleet card reader. Should only take a minute." Thomas didn't lower his phone. "It's fine. All authorised." Ashwell kept his tone level. "Still need to log the serial manually. Protocol. My mother's car doesn't require your protocol." Ashwell didn't blink. "All vehicles using Crown Trust accounts fall under review." That landed. Thomas shifted his weight, pocketed the phone. "Look, I'm just dropping off sealed papers. In and out. Let's not turn this into theatre." "Fleet 704 is charging an expired charity ledger," Ashwell said. "We'll need to inspect the reader." A pause. Not long, but taut. Thomas exhaled through his nose. "Fine. Do what you need to. But I'm telling you, there's nothing in that car you need to see." Ashwell's gaze didn't move from the Bentley's dash. Something about the way the console gleamed. Too clean. Too recent. He made 3 notes on the clipboard. Reader inspection required. Driver resistance logged. Proceeding. Then the wind picked up. Colder this time. Ashwell opened the driver's door slowly. The interior smelled wrong. Not the usual leather and faint must of a vehicle months old. This was fresh. Citrus cleaner. New plastic. Someone had wiped down every surface within the last hour. The vents were spotless. The dash shone a little too evenly. Thomas appeared on the passenger side, arms crossed. "This is ridiculous." "You're pulling panels over a fuel card?" Ashwell didn't look up. He connected the diagnostic tablet to the onboard port. The screen blinked once. Grey text filled the display. "Card reader IDOPF 1147. Linked account QMT_OP-TR-F_G IB." Ashwell stared at it. QMT. Queen's Memorial Trust. TRF_GIB. Transfer routing. Gibraltar branch. That wasn't a mistake. He tapped the metadata log. The reader had been installed 4 months ago, 6 months after the Queen's funeral. No replacement order existed in the Crown Fleet Registry. No work ticket. No authorization memo. Someone had swapped the console. "It's a shared card," Thomas said from behind him. "We use it for a few administrative things. Completely normal. Charity cards aren't cleared for personal fleet use." "Look," Thomas snapped, voice harder now. "Do you really want to make a scene over which fuel card paid for a few tanks?" Ashwell unplugged the tablet. "I'm going to need authorization to open the dash." "What?" "Serial mismatch. Replacement date conflicts. Foreign routing code. That requires escalation under Financial Integrity Protocol Section 8. Thomas's face went tight. "That's for stolen vehicles. It's also for disguised fund routing through charity infrastructure. You're accusing the Queen's son of financial manipulation." "I haven't accused anyone. I'm following the discrepancy." Thomas stepped closer, voice lower. "Let me be clear. You pop that dash open without royal approval, and I'll have your name at Clarence House by dinner." Ashwell didn't blink. "Then we'd better get that approval." He turned, keyed the mic clipped to his collar. "Command, this is Ashwell, Fleet Annex. Requesting supervisory authorization for dash level inspection. Asset 704 under Protocol 8. Reader ID conflicts with declared ledger. Potential misrouting through legacy trust." Silence on the channel. Then, "Received. Clearance granted. Proceed." Ashwell clicked off. Thomas didn't speak. He just exhaled hard and stepped back from the car like it had started to rot. Ashwell opened the panel kit, and the rain began. The console's lower trim came free with a quiet click. No sudden jerks. Just method. Ashwell had done this before, knew how Royal Fleet panels fit, how the screws seated, how the housing aligned. This one had been opened recently. The interior screws weren't flush. One sat slightly off-axis, like someone had reinstalled it in haste and hoped no one would notice. But there was something else. The housing bracket, the metal frame that held the reader in place, had fresh scratches along the left edge, tool marks, recent ones, the kind you get when you're working fast and the screwdriver slips. Ashwell loosened the first screw carefully, then the second. As he pulled the panel back, he caught the faint smell again. Not just citrus, paper, old ink, the kind that clings to documents stored in leather portfolios. There, wedged behind the fleet card reader and tucked beside a rubber grommeted sensor wire, was a folded stack of papers, bound by a worn beige rubber band. But it wasn't just papers. Beneath them, pressed flat against the metal housing, was a second item, a USB drive, black, unmarked, the kind issued to senior staff for encrypted file transfer. Ashwell left it where it was, photographed it first, then carefully extracted the papers. He didn't touch them at first, just studied how neatly they'd been placed. Deliberate. Hidden, but not buried. He slid the bundle free and laid it on a microfiber cloth across the passenger seat. No ceremonial seals, no envelopes. Just printed bank stubs, payment orders issued from the Queen's Memorial Trust over the past 8 months. Each one listed a different transaction, detailing charges, fuel reimbursements, long-haul service costs. But as Ashwell flipped through them, a pattern emerged. The amounts weren't random. They were carefully calculated. £47,000 in March, £52,000 in April, each month slightly different, but always just under the £60,000 threshold that would trigger automatic Treasury review. Someone knew the system, but none of the recipient accounts matched Crown operations. They all routed to Parker Holdings Limited, Gibraltar. Ashwell kept flipping. Toward the back of the stack, he found itemized receipts. Not fuel, property maintenance. Renovation consultancy, Gloucestershire Estate. Architectural survey, Wiltshire Holding. Legal advisory, land transfer protocols. These weren't fleet expenses, these were real estate costs. Charged to a memorial fund meant for preservation and public education. Halfway through, He found a handwritten note, printed on a torn sheet from a yellow legal pad. Consolidate balances before the audit. Use Fleet 704 for cover. Archive originals at Highgrove. No signature. But the handwriting was heavy, slanted, and familiar. Beneath the note was one more document, a draft proposal, printed but unsigned. The header read, Strategic Reallocation of Memorial Trust Assets, Efficiency Review. It outlined a plan to modernize the trust's holdings by converting underperforming legacy accounts into active investment vehicles. Translation: taking the Queen's memorial money and using it for private property development. Ashwell didn't pause. He retrieved his encrypted issue phone, took clear photographs of every document, front and back, time-stamped and indexed them into the Audit app, then sealed the papers back in the compartment just as he'd found them. The rubber band snapped faintly as it went back around the stack. He replaced the panel, screwed it back in carefully, matching the angle. Clean, undetectable. By the time the last screw tightened, the rain had thickened. The sounds of the annex dulled beneath it, just distant murmurs and water against steel. Ashwell stood, closed the car door, stepped beneath the canopy. Then he keyed his mic again. Fleet Command, this is Ashwell. 704 confirmed for misuse of Queen's Trust. Evidence discovered under dash, physically stored. Digital copies transmitted to Treasury Internal Channel under tag Royal Ledger Inquiry. A pause. Then, understood. Initiate ordnance. 14, Ashwell lowered the mic. Behind him, the Bentley sat quiet. Its reader blinking red in standby. No sirens, no alarms, just numbers. And a path someone thought no one would follow. Ashwell didn't wait. The moment confirmation came through, he opened his side pouch, removed a sealed red band marked Ordnance 14, Evidence Lockdown, and walked to the front of the Bentley. He crouched slightly, wiped the hood emblem clean with a cloth, pressed the red seal across the seam between bonnet and grille, adhesive strip glinting faintly in the wet light. A camera clicked from behind him. One of the Treasury aides had begun logging the containment for Crown records. No press, no spectacle, just the sound of institutional gears beginning to turn. Thomas stormed forward from beneath the overhang. "This is a joke. That vehicle belongs to my mother. You're locking it down like it's contraband." Ashwell stood without raising his voice. "It contains material assets linked to state fraud. It's no longer in active royal service. You're calling this theft now? Fuel logs and a few invoices?" Ashwell didn't reply. He applied the second seal, this one across the driver's side ignition. Once applied, it couldn't be removed without fracturing. "You've got no idea who you're accusing," Thomas growled. "Do you think the king will back you on this?" "Do you know how this looks?" Ashwell finally turned. "I don't need to know how it looks. I just need to follow what it shows." Thomas opened his mouth, then shut it. Behind them, 2 more guards arrived. Called from the central post, they approached silently, flanking either side of the bay. "Perimeter hold, east quadrant," Ashwell said. "Fleet 704, under Financial Evidence Protocol. Secure until executive override or audit relay." The senior guard simply nodded and took position by the rear quarter panel. The other stood beside the boot, hands folded. Ashwell stepped back and keyed his mic. "Fleet Command, Ashwell. Vehicle secured, physical seals in place. Witness present, photo log running, requesting instruction." The reply came a moment later. Different voice this time, clipped, senior. "Sergeant, hold position. His Majesty has been informed." Ashwell's gaze didn't change, but something in his jaw locked into place. "He's en route now." Ashwell turned his head slightly. The Bentley sat between the guards like a crown pulled from circulation, gleaming, silent, waiting. He folded his arms behind his back, and in the steady rain, with Thomas pacing just beyond the ropes, Sergeant Corin Ashwell stood at post, alone, but immovable. The Range Rover arrived without fanfare. No motorcade, no staff, just the low growl of its engine as it pulled into the courtyard, tyres hissing across wet stones. Ashwell didn't move. He remained at post beside the sealed Bentley, boots anchored just inches from the red tape on the bonnet. The two guards beside him straightened subtly, not in salute, just presence. The driver's door opened. King Charles stepped out. He wore a dark raincoat over a charcoal suit. No umbrella, no gloves. Just a folded leather folder in his left hand and a face set like stone. Ashwell stepped forward 3 paces. "Your Majesty." Charles didn't break stride. "Sergeant Ashwell." They stopped near the car's front. The wind blew faint mist between them. For a second they simply stood, monarch and soldier, with the Bentley gleaming like an accusation between them. "Show me," Charles said. Ashwell withdrew his inspection phone from the breast pocket of his coat. Waterproof. Time-stamped. He tapped the gallery open and handed it across. Charles held it close beneath the shallow overhang. Photo after photo. Receipts. Bank stubs. Fleet routing records. Every one marked with the same beneficiary name. Parker Holdings Limited, Gibraltar. The king exhaled slowly. Amount? £2.8 million over 9 months, Ashwell said, all drawn from the Queen's Memorial Trust. Charles's eyes remained fixed on the screen. Fleet card was linked directly? Yes, sir. Confirmed via reader metadata. Console housing had been replaced. Non-standard serial. No registry. The king's fingers tightened slightly around the phone. He scrolled to the image of the handwritten note. Just 8 words, scrawled between the stubs. Consolidate balances before audit. Fleet 704. He didn't ask whose handwriting it was. He didn't need to. Charles returned the device without comment. Rainwater dripped from the brim of his coat, soaking into the shoulders. He looked up at the Bentley, the red seals, the guards, the quiet hum of truth pressing in. "How long did it take you to find it?" he asked quietly. Ashwell answered plainly. 5 minutes into the reader scan, sir. A pause. "Did you know what it was?" Ashwell didn't blink. "I knew it shouldn't be there." Charles nodded once. "I'll speak to her directly," he said. "This doesn't go to Treasury yet. Not until I've looked her in the eye." Ashwell said nothing. Charles stepped forward, laid one gloved hand atop the hood of the Bentley. The red evidence seal split the crown emblem in half. For the first time in weeks, his voice softened, just slightly. "She wanted this car repainted, you know. Said the trim was too funeral black. I told her it should stay exactly as the Queen left it." He looked at Ashwell. "You were right not to open your mouth." Then he stepped back. "Be ready," and walked toward the palace without looking back. The corridor doors swung open with a gust of warm air and perfume. Camilla stepped into the courtyard first, coat pulled tight against the drizzle, heels ticking sharply against wet stone. Just behind her, Thomas Parker Bowles followed, his gait slower now, more measured, though his mouth was already set in irritation. She spotted the sealed Bentley instantly. Her pace slowed, then stopped. Across the courtyard, under the edge of the inspection arch, King Charles stood alone beside the car, hands folded behind his back. Rain threaded through the air between them, like strands of tension. 2 guards remained stationed at either end of the vehicle. Sergeant Ashwell stood motionless to the side. Camilla's voice cut the silence. "What is this nonsense?" Charles didn't raise his tone. "Your vehicle was caught billing our mother's charity." Repeatedly. Thomas exhaled hard. "It was a clerical route, simplification. Everyone uses shared ledgers now." "No," Charles replied calmly. "Everyone doesn't route charity funds into personal company accounts." He lifted the inspection phone and tapped the screen once. £2.8 million, Thomas. Straight from the Queen's Memorial Trust. Gibraltar routing code. Matched to Parker Holdings. Camilla stepped forward. "That's enough. This is being twisted. It was temporary. The funds were simply being held until the account migration finalised." "In your son's holding company?" Charles asked, arching a brow. She drew a breath. "Only because it was expedient. The foundation paperwork has been slow since Mummy passed. You know that." She didn't pass, Camilla, Charles said, voice tightening. She died, and she left that trust for her legacy, not your convenience. Thomas glanced away. Camilla pressed on. You're letting a guardsman and an overzealous auditor throw mud on your family's name. Ashwell didn't flinch. Charles cut her off. That guardsman found what none of your staff had the spine to report. Don't confuse silence with loyalty. Camilla's voice dropped. You're humiliating me. Here, like this. Charles's eyes narrowed. You did that the moment you used a dead queen's charity to cover a fleet detailing bill. Thomas stepped forward suddenly. You don't know everything. I know the routing number, Thomas, Charles snapped, and I know what it means to use public remembrance to pay for personal convenience. Camilla's lips parted, but she didn't speak. You were in the room when she set that trust up, Charles said, softer now. You heard her say it. Let this money do what I no longer can. And now it's fueling a Bentley and a tax haven. She looked away. Rain streaked down the side windows of the sealed car. One of the red evidence tags fluttered faintly in the wind. And then they appeared. Not all at once, just gradually. A face at an upper window, then another. The archivist, who'd served under the Queen's private secretary for 30 years, stood at the second-floor ledger room, one hand pressed flat against the glass. She didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. A groundskeeper paused near the stone wall, shears still in hand. 2 valets stood motionless in the conservatory doorway. A junior clerk from Treasury, the one who'd flagged the first discrepancy in the audit, stood beneath the overhang, with her tablet clutched to her chest. No one spoke, no one moved closer. But they were there, bearing witness. The kind of institutional memory that doesn't need words. The kind that gets passed down in careful phrases over tea, in hallways, in the spaces between official record and lived truth. Camilla felt it, the weight of their silence. She glanced once toward the windows, then back at the car. Charles turned toward Ashwell. Seal it entirely! Ashwell stepped forward with the final tag, the large vertical strip for the rear boot seam. He pressed it across the metal with calm precision. Camilla's voice was little more than a whisper. You'll regret making this public. It already is, Charles said. We just haven't written it down yet. She didn't reply. The wind shifted. A valet paused halfway across the inner arch. 2 footmen watched silently from a side window above. No one moved. But they were there, watching. The kind of silent institutional memory that doesn't need a headline, because everyone who needs to know will know by dinner. Ashwell stepped back. The Bentley was sealed, and the silence that followed wasn't shock. It was recognition. The rain was steady now, not a storm, but a relentless drizzle that soaked everything in silence. Ashwell crouched by the Bentley's rear wheel and peeled back the adhesive strip from the final evidence seal. It bore the Crown custodial emblem in red foil. Asset under review. Ordnance 14. He pressed it carefully across the seam, where the trunk met the frame, smoothing out the corners with his thumb. Then he retrieved a small metal stamp from his equipment pouch. Standard issue for guards assigned to evidence custody. He pressed it once against the seal, leaving an impression. His badge number, the date, the hour. Permanent, traceable, undeniable. Across from him, a court photographer clicked a single shot. No flash, no announcement, just the quiet documentation of institutional restraint. But there was one more step. Ashwell walked to the front of the vehicle and applied a triangular breakaway tag to the steering column, visible through the windscreen, yellow and black. The kind that fractures if anyone tries to start the ignition. Tampering would leave evidence, and more importantly, it would trigger an automatic alert to Crown security. The Bentley was now locked, not just physically, institutionally. Camilla stood motionless, arms folded, her coat collar pulled high against the wind. Her face was unreadable, but her posture was rigid. A woman used to commanding space now watching it shrink around her. Thomas stood beside her, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the gravel. He hadn't said a word since the last transfer stub was read aloud. Ashwell stood, stepped back, and nodded once to the registrar. The man approached with a digital tablet in hand. "Final confirmation required," he said quietly, addressing the king. Charles stepped forward. He didn't ask for a summary. He didn't need one. He tapped the screen once, paused over the line reading Asset, Crown Standard 704, Detainment Order confirmed, then signed his initials. C.R. Camilla's voice cut through the patter of rain. "You're humiliating me in front of guards, Charles." He looked up slowly. "No. You did that the moment you used the Queen's memorial to pay your son's expenses." She flushed, then straightened. "You think this will stay quiet? You think those pictures won't end up somewhere they shouldn't?" "This isn't about silence anymore," he said. "It's about correction." Thomas stepped forward. "You're letting a guard dictate royal optics." Ashwell didn't flinch. He hadn't moved, still holding post. Charles answered without looking at him. "I'm letting the truth dictate consequence, and for once it's not bending." A long moment passed. Then Charles looked toward the large portrait of Queen Elizabeth II that hung in the annex corridor behind them, her gaze frozen in formal grace, watching the courtyard even now. He pointed gently. "I'm not shaming this family. I'm protecting hers." The wind picked up. Ashwell stepped forward and wrapped the final corded stanchion around the vehicle's perimeter, attaching the last tag between two bollards. The Bentley was now completely enclosed, untouchable, documented and contained. One guard remained at the rear post, the other at the front. Camilla didn't speak again. Thomas turned away first, but neither of them crossed the stanchion line. They both knew it wasn't just paint and protocol anymore. It was a boundary, and it would hold. The rain was still falling when Sergeant Corin Ashwell stepped into the warmth of the Fleet Registry office. The light inside was soft and golden, filtered through the high arched windows that overlooked the motor court. He took off his gloves slowly, shaking the moisture from the cuffs of his sleeves, and approached the central desk. No one else spoke. This was the kind of room where ceremony didn't belong, only process. He opened the Crown Fleet custodial logbook, a leather-bound ledger thick with entries going back years. Every royal guard knew how to write in it. Not because someone taught them, but because no one ever rushed them. The pages smelled of old ink and vellum. Ashwell flipped past entries from decades prior, guards he'd never met, vehicles long since retired. But every entry was the same, precise, factual, permanent. Some pages had the king's grandfather's signature. Others bore marks from custodians who'd served under 3 monarchs. This wasn't just a logbook. It was a record of institutional memory, of moments when someone had to choose between convenience and principle. And here, in this room, principle always won. He turned to the current audit sheet and picked up the pen. Asset, Bentley, Crown Standard 704. Violation, misuse of Queen's Memorial Trust. Evidence recovered. Payment records £2.8 million. Gibraltar routing. Containment, full vehicle seal under Ordinance 14. Custodian, Sergeant Corin Ashwell, Coldstream. He signed beneath it. His handwriting, as always, was unadorned. Just sharp enough to mean something. Just permanent enough to matter. He was blotting the ink when he heard the door open behind him. King Charles entered alone. His coat was still damp at the shoulders, rainwater clinging to the hem. He stood at the opposite side of the registry desk, silent, eyes scanning the logbook without asking to. Then he picked up the second pen, the one marked for sovereign counter-signature, and added his initials under Ashwell's. C.R. A pause. No congratulations. No indulgence. Just the sound of a man breathing through the weight of doing what needed to be done. Charles set the pen down carefully and looked at Ashwell. "Do you ever question the weight of what you do?" Ashwell's answer came without hesitation. "Only if I stop doing it, sir." The king's mouth twitched. Not a smile, but something less rigid. "She would have approved," Charles said softly, nodding toward the faint shadow of the Queen's portrait that hung outside the ledger room in the hallway beyond. He paused, looked down at the open ledger. His finger traced the edge of the page where Ashwell's signature sat, neat, precise, final. "She told me once," Charles continued, voice lower now, that the memorial trust wasn't just about money. It was about making sure her final years of work didn't become someone else's first opportunity. Ashwell said nothing, but he listened. She was specific about it. No family access, no private routing. The moment someone tries to use my name for convenience, Charles, you stop them. She made me promise. The king's hand rested flat on the page. I didn't think it would be her, he said quietly, but I suppose that's the point. It's always someone you didn't expect. Ashwell didn't reply. He didn't need to. The record was written, not in headlines, not in press releases, just in quiet, permanent ink, where no one could erase it, and no one would ever need to. Charles rested one hand briefly on the closed ledger. Then he stepped back, gave Ashwell a single nod, and walked toward the corridor. He didn't say another word, and Ashwell didn't follow. The guard remained at the desk, still as stone, eyes on the page, because the car was sealed. The name was logged, and the Queen's memory was no longer alone in its defence. By dusk, the courtyard had emptied. The Bentley still sat beneath the arch, its black finish now dulled to a muted sheen beneath the amber flood lamps. Red evidence seals clung to every seam. Bonnet, ignition, trunk. The stanchions looped around it like a velvet cage. It didn't look like a royal vehicle anymore. It looked like a confession someone had tried to drive away. Rain had tapered to a mist. The air smelled of wet stone and petrol. From the upper floor, behind the conservatory glass, two silhouettes watched in silence. Camilla, her frame rigid beneath the curtain edge, and beside her, still and expressionless, Thomas. Neither spoke. Down below, Sergeant Corin Ashwell made his final patrol circuit of the courtyard, slow, methodical. He stopped near the stanchions, inspected the seals without touching them, then turned back toward the annex steps. He paused just once, halfway across the cobbles. That's when King Charles emerged. No entourage, no coat this time. Just a man walking the stones of a place his mother once called sacred. He passed Ashwell without a word. No salute was exchanged. None was needed. They both stopped near the car. For a moment they simply stood. The Queen's portrait, faintly visible through the ledger wing's window, watched them from above, caught in lamplight, her smile soft, timeless. Charles looked at the Bentley, at the seals, at everything it now represented. He said nothing. Ashwell stood with hands clasped behind his back, posture precise, eyes steady, gaze forward. Then, slowly, Charles turned and walked on. Ashwell remained. Because someone always does. The stanchions held, the seals fluttered once in the soft wind, and the courtyard, at last, went still, not silent, just settled. Discipline had outlasted power, and for tonight, that was enough. They thought no one would notice, that after the funeral, with cameras pointed at thrones and headlines screaming about succession, no one would think to ask where the Queen's memorial funds had gone. But someone did. One guard, one signature, one torn emblem on a car that never belonged to her. And now, Camilla's access is revoked, Thomas's accounts are under review, and the Queen's memory for tonight is protected. Now, before we show you the moment King Charles walked alone across that courtyard, tell us where in the world you're watching from in the comments below. Hit subscribe with the bell icon on, so you never miss a moment when silence fights back. And drop a like if you believe legacy should never be for sale, because this wasn't just about corruption. It was about the guard who refused to let it leave the palace. Not quietly, not this time.